The blizzard struck Wyoming with such ferocity that Asher Parker could barely see his own gloved hand stretched before his face. Yet somewhere in that howling white madness, he heard a woman's voice calling out commands with unwavering authority, and he knew in that instant that whoever she was, she possessed a strength that could move mountains. The year was 1885, and Asher had been tracking his brother's stolen horses for 3 days straight, when the storm descended upon the grasslands outside Kingston like a vengeful spirit. He had resigned himself to seeking shelter, perhaps digging into a snowbank if necessary, when he heard that voice cutting through the wind. It wasn't a scream of terror or a cry for help. It was steady, purposeful, guiding something or someone through nature's fury with remarkable composure. Asher urged his chestnut mare forward, squinting against the stinging ice crystals that felt like needles against his weathered face. He was 26 years old and had seen his share of Wyoming winters, but this storm was different. This was the kind of cold that killed people, that froze cattle where they stood and buried entire homesteads under mountains of white. The voice grew louder and Asher could make out words now. "Easy now, easy. That is right. Keep moving, do not stop. We are almost there." Through the swirling curtain of snow, shapes emerged. Horses, at least a dozen of them, moving in a tight cluster. And there, at the front, was a figure in a heavy coat, leading them with a rope in one hand and the other extended as if she could part the storm itself through sheer willpower. Asher called out, his voice hoarse from the cold. "Hello there. You need help," the figure turned, and even through the storm, Asher could see the flash of determination in her eyes. She was young, probably around his age, with strands of dark hair whipping free from beneath a wool hat. Her face was red from the cold but set with purpose. "I need to get these horses to shelter," she shouted back. "There is a canyon about half a mile east with an overhang. Can you help me keep them together?" Without hesitation, Asher maneuvered his mare to the opposite side of the herd. He noticed immediately that these horses were of fine stock, well cared for despite being caught in the storm. They were frightened but not panicked, which spoke volumes about the woman who led them. "I am Asher Parker," he called out as they pushed forward into the wind. "Winnie Harrison," she responded, her attention never wavering from the path ahead. "These are my father's horses. We were moving them to winter pasture when the storm hit. He is back at the ranch with a broken leg, could not make the journey." So she had taken on the responsibility herself. Asher felt a surge of admiration for this woman who refused to be cowed by circumstances that would have sent most men running for cover. They worked in tandem, using their horses to guide the herd, keeping the animals moving despite the wind trying to scatter them in every direction. The half-mile felt like 10. Snow accumulated so quickly that each step forward was a battle. Asher's fingers grew numb inside his gloves, and his face lost all feeling. He could only imagine what Winnie must be experiencing, yet she never faltered. She called out encouragement to the horses, her voice somehow remaining strong despite the brutal conditions. When the canyon wall finally materialized through the white haze, Asher felt a rush of relief so powerful it nearly brought tears to his eyes. Winnie had been right. There was an overhang, deep enough to shelter all the horses and wide enough that they could huddle together for warmth. Together, they guided the animals under the rocky outcropping. The difference was immediate. Out of the direct wind, the cold became bearable. The horses pressed close to one another, their breath creating clouds of steam in the relatively protected space. Winnie dismounted and began checking each horse systematically, running her hands along their legs, examining their eyes and ears for signs of frostbite. Asher did the same, working from the opposite end of the herd. When they met in the middle, Winnie finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was different now without the wind tearing at it. Softer, with a musical quality that caught Asher off guard. I do not know if I could have managed alone. You were doing fine when I found you, Asher replied honestly. I have never seen anyone handle horses like that in a blizzard. Most people would have let them scatter and hoped for the best. Winnie shook her head firmly. These horses trust me. I would not abandon that trust because nature decided to test us. They settled against the back wall of the overhang, their horses positioned with the herd. The storm raged beyond their shelter, but here they had respite. Asher pulled some jerky from his saddlebag and offered half to Winnie. She accepted it gratefully. What brought you out here? Winnie asked, chewing the dried meat slowly. You said your name is Parker. Are you related to the Parkers who own the ranch south of Kingston? That is my brother, actually. Ethan. Someone stole 12 of his best horses 2 days ago. I have been tracking them, but the storm has wiped out any trail. Asher paused, studying the horses around them more carefully. How many horses did you say you were moving? 14, Winnie replied. All accounted for, thank goodness. Asher felt his pulse quicken. Would you mind if I took a closer look at them? Just to be certain, Winnie's expression shifted, becoming guarded. You think some of these might be your brother's stolen horses? I do not mean to accuse you of anything, Asher said quickly, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. But if some of these horses were mixed with your father's herd, it would explain a lot. Horse thieves sometimes use storms to move stolen animals, knowing the weather will cover their tracks. For a long moment, Winnie studied him, her brown eyes searching his face for signs of deception. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded. Go ahead. My father bought these horses legitimately from a trader who came through Kingston 3 weeks ago. If any of them are stolen, he would want to know. Asher moved among the horses carefully, looking for the distinctive brand his brother used on all his stock. It was a simple design, an EP enclosed in a circle, burned into the right flank. He had checked perhaps 8 horses when he found it. A magnificent black gelding with white socks on its rear legs bore the mark clearly. This one, Asher said quietly, gesturing for Winnie to join him. She came over and examined the brand, her face falling. I remember this horse. The trader said he came from a ranch in Montana, selling off stock before winter. My father paid good money for him. What did this trader look like? Winnie described a man with a scar running down his left cheek and cold gray eyes. Asher's jaw tightened. That sounds like Samuel Cord. He has a reputation for dealing in stolen livestock. Works with a small gang, moves quickly from town to town. They continued checking the herd together and found 2 more horses bearing Ethan's brand. Winnie's distress was evident, not because she had been caught with stolen property, but because her father had been swindled. My father is an honest man, she said, her voice thick with emotion. He saved for months to buy these horses. He thought he was getting a good deal, but he was just being taken advantage of by a criminal. I believe you, Asher said, and he meant it. Everything about Winnie Harrison spoke of integrity. This is not your fault or your father's. Samuel Cord is good at what he does, which is why he has not been caught yet. What happens now? Winnie asked. With the horses, I mean. I know they belong to your brother. Asher considered for a moment. The storm is going to last through the night at least. When it clears, we will get these horses back to Kingston. My brother can sort out what belongs to him, and perhaps we can help your father recover some of the money he lost. Samuel Cord might still be in the area. If we can find him before he moves on, there is a chance of getting justice. They spent the rest of the afternoon tending to the horses, making sure none had suffered injury from the brutal journey. As the day faded and darkness crept over the land, the temperature dropped even further. Winnie and Asher gathered what dry brush and wood they could find at the back of the overhang and managed to start a small fire. It was not much, but it provided a circle of warmth and light against the encroaching night. Sitting beside the fire, sharing the meager supplies they had between them, Asher found himself watching Winnie when she was not looking. She had removed her heavy coat, revealing a practical wool shirt and sturdy trousers beneath. Her dark hair hung in damp waves around her shoulders, and her face, no longer red from the cold, showed delicate features and a strong jawline. But it was not her physical appearance that captivated him. It was the way she moved with confidence and purpose, the way she spoke to the horses with genuine affection, the way she had faced down a killer storm without flinching. He had known plenty of women in his life, some beautiful, some clever, some kind. But he had never met one who embodied all these qualities plus raw courage in the face of danger. "You are staring," Winnie said without looking at him, a hint of amusement in her voice. Asher felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the fire. "I apologize. I was just thinking about how most people would have turned back when the storm hit. You kept going." "Those horses needed me," Winnie replied simply. "Besides, I have been through storms before. Wyoming does not coddle the weak. How long have you been working with horses?" Winnie's expression softened with memory. "Since I was a little girl. My mother died when I was 8 years old and my father raised me on his own. He treated me like a son in many ways, taught me everything he knew about ranching and animals. Some people in Kingston think it is strange, a woman doing man's work, but my father never saw it that way. He said ability matters more than what people expect." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He is," Winnie agreed, "which is why it pains me that he was tricked by Samuel Cord. My father prides himself on being a good judge of character." "Con men like Cord make their living fooling people," Asher said. "There is no shame in being deceived by a professional liar." They talked long into the night, their conversation flowing easily despite being strangers just hours before. Asher told her about growing up with his brother, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the dreams he had of one day owning his own ranch instead of working on someone else's land. Winnie shared stories of her childhood, of the challenges of being a woman in a world that often dismissed her capabilities, of her determination to prove that she could manage her father's ranch as well as any man. She spoke with passion about the land, about the horses she raised and trained, about her vision for breeding the finest stock in Wyoming. As the fire burned low and exhaustion finally claimed them, they arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the small blaze. The storm continued to rage outside their shelter, but within the overhang, surrounded by the gentle breathing of the horses, Asher felt a strange sense of peace. He lay awake for a while, listening to Winnie's breathing settle into the rhythm of sleep, thinking about how one unexpected encounter could shift the course of a life. He had set out to find his brother's stolen horses, and instead had found something far more valuable, though he could not yet put a name to what that something was. Morning arrived with crystalline clarity. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow blanketed everything in pristine white, and the sun reflecting off the fresh powder was almost blinding in its intensity. Asher stepped out from under the overhang and surveyed the landscape. Drifts had piled high against the canyon walls, and the flat grassland stretched like an endless white ocean. Winnie emerged shortly after, already moving to check on the horses. Together they assessed their situation. The horses were in good condition despite the ordeal. Their supplies were limited, but Kingston was only about 8 miles away if they headed southwest. We should be able to make it back by late afternoon if we move steadily, Winnie said, studying the sun's position. The horses will need water and proper feed. They set out carefully, breaking trail through the fresh snow. The horses followed in a line, each one stepping in the tracks of the one before it to conserve energy. It was slow going, but the weather held clear and cold, and they made steady progress. As they traveled, Asher found himself riding closer to Winnie, drawn by her presence in a way he had never experienced before. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversation ranging from practical matters of ranching to deeper questions about life and purpose. "Do you ever think about leaving Wyoming?" Asher asked at one point. Seeing what lies beyond these plains, Winnie considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I wonder about other places, but this land is in my blood. My father homesteaded our ranch when I was just a baby, built it from nothing into something worth having. I cannot imagine abandoning that legacy." "That is not abandoning it. That is just experiencing the world." "Perhaps," Winnie acknowledged, "but I have responsibilities here. Especially now with my father injured. The ranch needs me." "What happened to him?" "The broken leg, I mean. A horse spooked and kicked him 2 weeks ago. The doctor says it will heal, but he needs to stay off it for at least another month. In the meantime, everything falls to me." There was no complaint in her voice, just a statement of fact. They crested a rise and saw Kingston spread below them in the valley. The town was small but prosperous, serving the ranches and homesteads scattered across this corner of Wyoming. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the main street cut a dark line through the snow-covered buildings. As they guided the horses down the slope toward town, Asher saw people emerging from buildings to watch their approach. A herd of horses being driven through town was not unusual, but the size of this group and the fact that a woman was leading them drew attention. They made their way to the livery stable at the edge of town. The owner, a grizzled man named Thomas who had known Winnie since she was a child, came out to help them get the horses settled. "Winnie Harrison, what in blazes are you doing bringing horses through that storm?" Thomas demanded, though his gruff tone was undercut by obvious relief at seeing her safe. "Getting them to safety," Winnie replied calmly. "Thomas, this is Asher Parker. We need to send word to his brother. Some of these horses were stolen from him." Thomas's bushy eyebrows shot up, but he nodded and sent his young assistant running to fetch Ethan Parker from the ranch. While they waited, Winnie and Asher got the horses settled in the stable, making sure each animal had water and feed. Ethan arrived within the hour, a tall man who bore a strong resemblance to Asher but with harder edges and more gray in his hair, despite being only 3 years older. He listened as Asher explained the situation, his expression growing darker when Samuel Cord's name came up. "I knew it was him," Ethan growled. "That snake has been operating in this territory for 2 years, and nobody can seem to catch him." He examined the 3 horses bearing his brand, running his hands along their flanks with the familiarity of ownership. "These are definitely mine. Fine animals, all of them. I am grateful to have them back, Asher." "Thank Winnie Harrison," Asher said, gesturing to where Winnie stood by the stable door. "She is the one who kept them safe through the storm, and her father is the one who was swindled by Cord." Ethan turned to Winnie, his expression softening slightly. "Miss Harrison, I know your father. He is an honest man. This situation is not of his making." "Thank you," Winnie said, "but he did pay for those horses, stolen or not." "I do not expect charity, Mr. Parker, but I would appreciate any help in tracking down Samuel Cord so my father might recover his losses." "You will have it," Ethan promised. "In fact, I am heading to the sheriff right now to report this. If Cord is still in the area, we need to move quickly." He paused, looking between Asher and Winnie with an expression that suggested he was seeing something that amused him. "Asher, why do not you escort Miss Harrison home? Make sure she gets back to her ranch safely after everything she has been through. I can handle matters with the sheriff." Asher caught the knowing look in his brother's eyes and felt that warmth in his face again. If Miss Harrison would not mind the company, Winnie met his gaze, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw a hint of uncertainty in her expression. It vanished quickly, replaced by her usual composure. "I would welcome it. The ranch is about 5 miles north of town. We should arrive before dark." They left their horses to rest at the livery and borrowed a wagon and fresh team from Thomas. The road north had been traveled enough that the snow was packed down, making for easier going than their journey that morning. As they drove, Asher found himself acutely aware of Winnie's presence beside him on the wagon seat, the way her shoulder occasionally brushed his when they hit a rough patch. The Harrison ranch appeared as they rounded a bend in the road. It was a modest spread, smaller than his brother's operation but well maintained. The main house was a sturdy log structure with a covered porch, and the barn and outbuildings showed the care of someone who took pride in their property. A man stood on the porch, leaning heavily on a crutch. He was perhaps 50 years old, with the weathered face of someone who had spent decades working outdoors. When he saw Winnie, his expression transformed from worry to relief. "Winnie, thank God you are safe. When the storm hit, I feared the worst." "I am fine, Pa," Winnie called back, climbing down from the wagon with easy grace. "The horses are all safe too, sheltered at the livery in town." Asher descended and stood back as Winnie embraced her father. When she pulled away, she gestured for Asher to join them. "Pa, this is Asher Parker. He helped me get the horses to shelter during the storm. Asher, this is my father, Walter Harrison." Walter extended his hand and Asher shook it, noting the strength in the older man's grip despite his injury. "Any friend of my daughter is welcome here. Please come inside. It is too cold to stand talking out here." The interior of the house was warm and clean, with simple furnishings that showed more care than money. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the smell of stew simmering on the stove made Asher's stomach growl, reminding him that he had not had a proper meal since before the storm. As they settled around the kitchen table, Winnie explained everything that had happened. Walter's expression grew grim when he heard about the stolen horses and Samuel Cord's deception. "I should have known better," Walter said, his voice heavy with self-recrimination. "The price was too good, the story too convenient." "You could not have known," Asher assured him. "Cord has fooled men far more experienced than you, but my brother is working with the sheriff now. There is a good chance they will catch him." "That does not solve my immediate problem," Walter said. "I paid $800 for those horses, money I do not have to lose. Winter is coming, and I needed those animals to build up my breeding stock." Asher saw the worry etched in the older man's face and made a decision. "My brother is a fair man. He will work something out with you about the 3 horses that were his. And when we catch Cord, you will get your money back." "You sound certain you will catch him," Walter observed. "I am," Asher replied, though he was not entirely sure why he felt so confident. Perhaps it was simply that he could not bear to see the concern in Winnie's eyes, could not stand the thought of this family suffering because of a criminal's greed. Winnie insisted that Asher stay for supper, and he found himself accepting despite knowing he should probably return to town. The meal was simple but delicious, and the conversation around the table felt natural and easy. Walter Harrison proved to be a thoughtful man with a dry sense of humor, and Asher found himself understanding where Winnie had gotten her strength of character. After dinner, as darkness settled over the land, Asher knew he needed to leave. Winnie walked him out to the wagon, the cold night air crisp and still after the previous day's fury. "Thank you," Winnie said quietly, "for everything. For helping with the horses, for being kind to my father about the situation." "You do not need to thank me," Asher replied. "I only did what anyone would do." "No," Winnie said firmly. "Not anyone. Most men would have assumed the worst, would have treated my father like a criminal. You saw the truth." They stood in the moonlight, their breath creating small clouds between them. Asher wanted to say something profound, something that would capture the way his world had shifted in the past day and a half. But words failed him, so he simply said, "I would like to call on you again, if that would be acceptable." Winnie smiled, and even in the dim light, Asher could see the warmth in her expression. "I would like that very much." The ride back to Kingston felt longer than the journey out, though Asher knew it was only because he was alone with his thoughts. He kept replaying moments from the past 2 days, analyzing every word Winnie had spoken, every glance she had given him. He had never been the type to lose his head over a woman, had always been practical about relationships. But everything about Winnie Harrison challenged his assumptions about what he wanted from life. He returned the wagon to Thomas and collected his own horse, then made his way to his brother's ranch on the southern edge of town. Ethan was still awake, sitting by the fire in his study, nursing a glass of whiskey. "Well," Ethan asked as Asher entered, "did you see the lady home safely?" "I did," Asher confirmed. "Any news on Cord?" Ethan's expression darkened. "The sheriff has put together a small posse. We leave at first light. Cord was spotted at a trading post about 20 miles west yesterday afternoon. If we move quickly, we might catch him before he realizes we are onto him." "I am coming with you," Asher said immediately. "I figured you would." Ethan took a sip of his whiskey, studying his younger brother over the rim of the glass. "She got to you, did she, Miss Harrison?" "I do not know what you mean." Ethan laughed. "Please, Asher, I have known you your whole life. I saw the way you looked at her today, like she hung the moon and painted the stars." Asher felt defensive, but could not entirely deny the accusation. "She is remarkable. She led a dozen horses through a blizzard that would have killed most people." "And she is beautiful," Ethan added with a knowing smile. "That too," Asher admitted, "but it is more than that. I have never met anyone like her." "Then I suggest you catch Samuel Cord," Ethan said seriously. "Because until that man is brought to justice and Walter Harrison gets his money back, you will always be the man who showed up when his life was falling apart. Sometimes that is enough to build something on, but sometimes it is not." Asher understood what his brother was saying. He did not want Winnie's potential feelings for him to be born from gratitude or necessity. He wanted her to choose him freely, without obligation or debt coloring her decision. The next morning arrived cold and clear. The posse assembled at dawn. 6 men including Asher, Ethan, and Sheriff Morrison, a no-nonsense lawman who had been trying to catch Samuel Cord for the better part of 2 years. They rode hard toward the west, following the information the sheriff had gathered about Cord's last known location. The trading post was a ramshackle building serving travelers and trappers passing through the territory. The owner, a nervous man named Peters, confirmed that Cord had been there 2 days ago but claimed not to know where he had gone afterward. Sheriff Morrison was not convinced. "Mr. Peters, I can either believe you are telling the truth, or I can believe you are protecting a known criminal. One of those options ends with you in a jail cell as an accessory. Which story would you like to stick with?" Peters crumbled under the pressure and admitted that Cord had mentioned heading to a lined shack in the foothills about 15 miles north. He used it sometimes when he needed to lay low with stolen goods. The posse thanked Peters for his cooperation and headed north. The landscape grew more rugged as they climbed into the foothills, the snow deeper here where the wind had piled it against the slopes. They found the line shack just as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon. It was a crude structure, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but smoke rose from the chimney, indicating someone was inside. Sheriff Morrison had them spread out, surrounding the building before he called out. "Samuel Cord, this is Sheriff Morrison. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands where I can see them." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and a man stepped out. He matched the description Winnie had given perfectly, down to the scar running down his left cheek. His hands were raised, but his expression showed no fear, only calculation. "Sheriff," Cord said smoothly, "there seems to be some misunderstanding. I am just a trader trying to make an honest living." "An honest living selling stolen horses," Ethan called out. "I have 3 animals in Kingston that bear my brand and a bill of sale you forged." Cord's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his calm demeanor. "I purchased those horses legitimately. If they were stolen before they came to me, that is not my fault." "Save it for the judge," Sheriff Morrison said. "You are under arrest for horse theft and fraud. We have witnesses and evidence." Cord's hand moved toward his coat, and Asher saw the glint of metal. "Gun!" he shouted, drawing his own weapon. The next few seconds passed in a blur. Cord pulled a pistol, but before he could aim it, Sheriff Morrison's shot rang out, hitting Cord in the shoulder and spinning him around. The gun fell from his hand, and he collapsed to his knees in the snow, cursing. 2 of the posse members rushed forward to secure him while another kicked the pistol away. Asher felt his heart pounding, the reality of how close they had come to a gunfight settling over him like a cold weight. They bound Cord's wound and tied his hands, then loaded him onto a horse for the journey back to Kingston. A search of the line shack revealed a strongbox containing nearly $3,000 in cash and several forged bills of sale. Cord had been running his operation for longer and more successfully than anyone had realized. The ride back to town felt triumphant. They had caught a man who had been eluding justice for years and recovered money that would go a long way toward making his victims whole. When they arrived in Kingston after dark, news of Cord's capture spread quickly through the small community. Asher wanted to ride straight to the Harrison ranch and tell Winnie the news, but it was too late and too dark for such a visit. Instead, he spent a restless night at his brother's ranch, counting the hours until morning when he could make the journey north. He arrived at the Harrison place just after breakfast to find Winnie in the barn, tending to the remaining horses her father owned. She looked up when she heard his approach, and the smile that spread across her face made every moment of the previous day's hard riding worthwhile. "Asher," she said warmly, "I heard you caught Samuel Cord." "News travels fast," Asher replied, dismounting and leading his horse into the barn. "We found him holed up in the foothills. The sheriff recovered the money he has been stealing. Your father should get back most if not all of what he paid for the horses." Winnie's eyes shone with unshed tears. "That is wonderful news. My father was so worried. This will make such a difference." "There is more," Asher continued. "My brother wanted me to tell you that he is willing to sell your father the remaining 11 horses at a fair price. Not what Cord charged, but what they are actually worth. He said your father has a good reputation, and he would rather the horses go to someone who will care for them properly." When he set down the brush she had been using and walked closer to Asher. "Why are you and your brother being so kind to us? You do not owe us anything." "Maybe I want to," Asher said quietly. The barn was dim, with only the morning light filtering through the cracks in the walls, but he could see every detail of Winnie's face, the way she was looking at him with a mixture of hope and caution. "Want to what?" Winnie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Help you, know you, be part of your life. Asher took a step closer, his heart racing. Winnie, I have not been able to stop thinking about you since that moment I found you in the storm. The way you commanded those horses, the way you refused to give up despite the danger. I have never met anyone like you. I have not been able to stop thinking about you either, Winnie admitted. But Asher, you barely know me. What you saw in that storm, that was just one moment. What if the rest of me disappoints you? Then I will discover that over time, the same way people always learn about each other, Asher replied. But I do not think I will be disappointed. Everything I have learned about you since that moment has only made me more certain that you are extraordinary. Winnie reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm despite the cold morning. My life is here on this ranch. I cannot leave my father, especially not now with his injury. I am not asking you to leave, Asher said. I am asking if I can court you properly. Come visit, get to know you and your father better, see where this feeling between us might lead. Yes, Winnie said simply. Yes, I would like that very much. Asher felt a surge of joy so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and entirely right. Walter Harrison appeared in the barn doorway at that moment, leaning on his crutch and trying to look stern despite the smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Mr. Parker, are your intentions toward my daughter honorable? Asher released Winnie's hand and turned to face her father. Yes, sir. Completely honorable. I would like your permission to court her. Walter studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You have it. But I am warning you now, Asher Parker, my daughter is not some delicate flower who needs protecting. She is strong and capable and deserves a man who sees that as a gift, not a challenge to overcome. I do see it as a gift, Asher assured him. That strength is part of what drew me to her. Good, Walter said. Now come up to the house. We need to discuss this business with the horses and the money, and Winnie needs to finish her chores. Just because you are courting her does not mean the work does not get done. Over the following weeks, Asher became a regular presence at the Harrison Ranch. He would ride out several times a week, sometimes helping with work around the property, sometimes simply spending time with Winnie and her father. He learned the rhythms of their life, the challenges they faced, the dreams they held for the future of their ranch. Walter's leg healed slowly but steadily, and with the money recovered from Samuel Cord plus the fair price Ethan charged for the remaining horses, the Harrison Ranch found itself on solid financial footing for the first time in years. Walter used some of the money to hire a ranch hand, which took some of the burden off Winnie and gave her more time to spend with Asher. They would ride out together across the snow-covered grasslands, Winnie showing him the far corners of her father's property, sharing her vision for what the ranch could become. Asher found himself caught up in her enthusiasm, offering suggestions and ideas, imagining a future where their lives and dreams might intertwine. Winter deepened, and with it, Asher's feelings for Winnie grew stronger. He loved the way she laughed when he told stories about his childhood misadventures with Ethan. He loved how she was never afraid to challenge him when she disagreed with something he said. He loved watching her work with the horses, the natural grace and confidence she displayed. One evening in late January, as they sat by the fire in the Harrison house after supper, Walter excused himself and went to bed early, leaving Asher and Winnie alone. The fire crackled softly, and outside, fresh snow was falling, adding to the already deep drifts. He is not very subtle, is he? Winnie said with a soft laugh once her father had closed his bedroom door. No, Asher agreed, but I appreciate the privacy. They sat together on the sofa, closer than propriety strictly allowed but not touching. Asher could feel the warmth radiating from Winnie's body, could smell the faint scent of lavender soap in her hair. "Winnie," he began, his voice serious, "these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. I wake up thinking about you and go to sleep with you on my mind. When I am not here, I am counting the hours until I can see you again." Winnie turned to face him fully, her brown eyes reflecting the firelight. "I feel the same way. It frightens me sometimes how quickly and completely you have become part of my life." "Does it have to frighten you?" Asher asked gently. "Maybe," Winnie admitted. "I have spent so long being independent, relying only on myself and my father, letting someone else in, trusting them with my heart, that is terrifying." Asher reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I am terrified too. But I think some things are worth being afraid for." Winnie squeezed his hand. "What are you saying, Asher?" "I am saying that I love you," Asher replied, the words feeling both monumental and simple at the same time. "I love your strength and your courage. I love your dedication to your father and this ranch. I love the way you refuse to be limited by what other people think women should or should not do. I love everything about you, Winnie Harrison, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Tears spilled down Winnie's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since that moment in the storm when you appeared like an answer to a prayer I did not know I was making." Asher leaned forward slowly, giving Winnie every opportunity to pull away, but she did not. Instead, she met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Asher felt like the world had shifted on its axis, like everything before this moment had been preparation for everything that would come after. "Marry me," he said, the proposal emerging spontaneously, driven by the certainty in his heart. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months, but I am more sure of this than I have ever been of anything." "Yes," Winnie replied without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They sat together by the fire, making plans and dreaming out loud until the flames burned low, and exhaustion finally claimed them. Asher reluctantly prepared to leave, but Winnie walked him to the door, and they shared another long kiss in the moonlight before he mounted his horse for the ride back to his brother's ranch. The next morning, Asher spoke with Ethan about his plans. His brother was unsurprised by the news of the engagement and genuinely happy for him. "So what will you do?" Ethan asked. "Move to the Harrison place. Convince Winnie to leave her father's ranch." "Neither," Asher said. "Walter and I have been talking. His ranch is good land, but it is small. He has big dreams but limited resources. I have some money saved, and you have been generous with my wages over the years. I am going to invest in the Harrison Ranch, become a partner in building it into something bigger." "And what about me?" Ethan asked, though there was no accusation in his voice, just curiosity. "You have 3 other good ranch hands, and you have been saying for years that you want to scale back, focus more on quality than quantity. This gives you the opportunity to do that." Asher paused. "Unless you need me to stay. My commitment to Winnie does not mean abandoning my family." Ethan clapped him on the shoulder. "I do not need you to stay. I want you to be happy, and it is clear that Winnie Harrison makes you happy. Build your life with her, little brother. You have my blessing and my support." The wedding was planned for early spring, after the worst of the winter had passed, but before the busy season of calving and planting began. It would be a simple affair at the church in Kingston, with just family and close friends attending. Winnie began preparing with the help of some of the women in town, and Asher threw himself into work at both his brother's ranch and the Harrison place, saving every penny he could toward their future. As winter gave way to spring, the grasslands transformed from white to green, and the world felt full of possibility. Walter's leg had healed completely, and he moved around the ranch with his old energy restored. The new ranch hand, a young man named Peter, proved to be a hard worker and quick learner. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, warm sunshine, and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers across the prairie. The church was packed with people from Kingston and the surrounding ranches, all come to witness the union of Asher Parker and Winnie Harrison. When Winnie walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Asher felt his breath catch in his throat. She wore a simple white dress that she had made herself, with her dark hair pinned up and a few wildflowers woven through it. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was radiant with joy and confidence, walking toward him with that same determined stride she had used to lead horses through a blizzard. The ceremony was brief, but meaningful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to support each other through whatever challenges life might bring, to be partners in every sense of the word, to build a life together based on love and mutual respect. When the preacher declared them husband and wife and Asher kissed his bride, cheers erupted through the church. The celebration afterward at the town hall was lively, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible for such a small community to produce. As evening approached and the party began to wind down, Asher and Winnie slipped away to begin their new life together. They had decided to stay at the Harrison Ranch, in the house where Winnie had grown up. Walter had moved into a smaller cabin on the property, insisting that the main house should belong to the young couple. Their wedding night was tender and full of discovery, two people learning each other in new and intimate ways. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Winnie traced patterns on Asher's chest with her fingertips. "What are you thinking about?" Asher asked, running his hand through her hair. "About that blizzard," Winnie replied. "About how lost I felt even though I was trying so hard to be brave. And then you appeared and suddenly I was not alone anymore. It felt like fate." "Maybe it was," Asher said. "Or maybe we just got lucky. Either way, I am grateful for that storm, as terrible as it was. It brought me to you." "It showed me something too," Winnie said thoughtfully. "I had spent so long proving I could do everything myself that I forgot there was strength in accepting help, in letting someone stand beside me instead of always standing alone. We will always stand together now," Asher promised. "Whatever comes, we face it as partners." The years that followed proved that promise true. Asher and Winnie worked side by side to build the Harrison Ranch into one of the most successful horse breeding operations in Wyoming. They combined Winnie's natural talent with horses with Asher's business sense and tireless work ethic to create something greater than either could have achieved alone. Walter remained an integral part of the ranch, his experience and wisdom guiding the younger generation, while he took satisfaction in seeing his daughter happy, and the land he had homesteaded thriving. In the spring of 1887, Winnie gave birth to their first child, a son they named William after Winnie's father. The baby was healthy and strong, with Winnie's dark hair and Asher's bright blue eyes. Holding his son for the first time, Asher felt a completeness he had not known was missing from his life. Watching Winnie with their child, seeing the gentle way she cradled him and the fierce protectiveness in her eyes, Asher fell in love with her all over again. She approached motherhood the way she approached everything, with courage and determination tempered by genuine tenderness. Their family grew over the following years. A daughter named Alice came in 1889, followed by another son, Thomas, in 1891. The house that had once seemed spacious now rang with the sounds of children playing, and the ranch became a place of life and laughter. Asher proved to be a devoted father, teaching his children to ride almost before they could walk, sharing with them his love of the land and animals. But he also made sure they understood the values that had drawn him to their mother, encouraging their independence and respecting their individual strengths. Winnie balanced her role as a mother with her continued involvement in the ranch. She refused to give up the work she loved, instead finding ways to include the children in it. They learned by watching her gentle a skittish horse or deliver a difficult foal, lessons about patience and compassion that would serve them throughout their lives. The ranch continued to prosper. Their horses gained a reputation for quality throughout the territory, and buyers came from as far as Colorado and Montana to purchase their stock. Asher and Winnie reinvested their profits back into the land, buying additional acreage and improving their facilities. In 1895, when William was 8 years old, a terrible drought struck Wyoming. The grasslands turned brown and brittle, and water sources dried up across the territory. Many ranchers lost everything, forced to sell their land for pennies on the dollar or simply abandon it altogether. Asher and Winnie faced the crisis together, making difficult decisions about which animals to keep and which to sell, digging deeper wells and hauling water from distant sources. There were days when Asher wondered if they would make it through, if all they had built would crumble under the relentless sun. But Winnie never wavered. She attacked each problem with the same determination she had shown in that long-ago blizzard, refusing to surrender to circumstances beyond her control. Her courage bolstered Asher during the darkest moments, reminding him why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. They survived the drought, though it took years to fully recover. Many of their neighbors were not so fortunate, and Asher and Winnie found themselves in a position to help, buying struggling ranches at fair prices and employing people who would have otherwise lost everything. They built a community around their ranch, a collection of families working together for mutual benefit. Walter passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1898, having lived to see his grandchildren grow and his daughter's dreams realized beyond anything he had imagined. His loss was deeply felt, but there was comfort in knowing he had spent his final years surrounded by love and had seen the land he cherished in capable hands. As the new century approached, Asher and Winnie found themselves looking back on 15 years of marriage with deep satisfaction. Their children were healthy and happy, their ranch was successful, and their love for each other had only deepened with time and shared experience. One evening in late autumn of 1899, they sat together on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the grasslands in shades of gold and crimson. The children were inside, supposedly doing homework, but more likely causing some kind of mischief. The sounds of their laughter drifted through the open windows. "You ever think about that day we met?" Asher asked, his arm around Winnie's shoulders as they shared the porch swing Walter had built years ago. "All the time," Winnie replied, leaning into him. "Sometimes I still cannot believe how much has changed since then, how one moment in a storm led to all of this." "You know what I remember most clearly," Asher said. "The sound of your voice cutting through the wind, so steady and sure. I knew right then that you were someone special." "I was terrified," Winnie admitted. "I was trying so hard to seem brave to keep the horses calm, but inside I was scared I had made a terrible mistake by not turning back." "But you did not turn back," Asher pointed out. "You kept going. That is who you are, Winnie. Someone who faces the storm head-on." "I had help," Winnie said, tilting her face up to kiss him softly. "The best kind of help, a partner who chose to stand with me." As darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one overhead, they talked about their plans for the future. William was showing a real talent for working with horses, and might one day take over that aspect of the ranch. Alice had her mother's fierce independence, and was already talking about becoming a veterinarian, an ambitious goal for a girl but one her parents encouraged. Thomas was still young, but he showed signs of having his father's head for business. "Whatever they choose to do, wherever they go, I hope they remember this place," Winnie said. "I hope they understand what it took to build it and that it was built with love." "They will," Asher assured her. "Because we will teach them, just like your father taught you." In the spring of 1902, Winnie discovered she was pregnant again. At 37, it was unexpected but welcome news. Their youngest, Thomas, was already 11, and they had thought their family was complete. But life, as Winnie often said, had a way of surprising you. The pregnancy was harder than her previous ones, and Asher worried constantly despite Winnie's assurances that she was fine. When their daughter was born in December of that year, small but healthy, they named her Grace, because she seemed like a gift of grace after so many years. The early years of the new century brought changes to Wyoming and to their corner of it. Kingston grew, adding new businesses and amenities. The railroad expanded, making it easier to ship horses to distant markets. Automobiles began to appear on the roads, though Asher remained skeptical of the noisy machines, preferring his horses. Through it all, the Parker Ranch, as it had come to be known despite still carrying the Harrison name on the deed, remained a constant. A place where hard work was valued, where family came first, where the land was treated with respect and care. William grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, but with his mother's gift for understanding horses. He married a girl from town in 1906 and brought her to live on the ranch, building a small house on the property with Asher's help. The arrival of their first child in 1907 made Asher and Winnie grandparents, a role they embraced with joy. Alice did indeed pursue her dream of veterinary medicine, though it meant traveling to Colorado for schooling and facing discrimination and doubt at every turn. But she had her mother's determination and her father's support, and she graduated in 1908, one of only a handful of female veterinarians in the western states. She returned to Wyoming and set up practice in Kingston, becoming an invaluable resource to the ranching community. Thomas showed an aptitude for business and eventually took over the financial management of the ranch, allowing Asher to focus more on the day-to-day operations he loved. Together they expanded the operation further, always careful to maintain the quality that had become their hallmark. Grace grew up as the baby of the family, adored by her older siblings and doted on by her parents. She had a quick mind and a kind heart, and from an early age showed interest in teaching. Asher and Winnie made sure she had access to the best education available, determined that all their children would have opportunities to pursue their dreams. As Asher approached 50, he found himself reflecting more often on the path his life had taken. The young cowboy who had set out to find his brother's stolen horses in a Wyoming blizzard could never have imagined the life he would build. But looking around at his family, his ranch, the legacy he and Winnie had created together, he felt profound gratitude. One winter evening in 1910, 25 years after that fateful storm, Asher and Winnie bundled up against the cold and went for a walk across their land. The moon was full, turning the snow-covered grasslands into a landscape of silver and shadow. They walked hand in hand, their breath creating clouds in the freezing air, comfortable in the silence that comes from decades of knowing someone completely. They ended up at the canyon where they had sheltered that long-ago night. The overhang was still there, unchanged by the passage of time. They stood under it, looking out at the winter landscape. "You remember?" Winnie asked softly. "Every moment," Asher replied. "I remember thinking I had never seen anyone so brave, so beautiful," Winnie laughed. I was frozen half to death and terrified. If that is beautiful, I would hate to see ugly. You could never be ugly, Asher said seriously. Not to me. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen then and now. Flatterer, Winnie accused, but she was smiling. I mean it, Asher insisted. That night, watching you in the storm, I saw true beauty. Not the kind that fades with time, but the kind that grows stronger. The beauty of courage and determination and a heart brave enough to face whatever comes. Winnie turned to face him fully, reaching up to touch his weathered face with her gloved hand. You gave me something that night, too. You showed me that I did not have to face everything alone, that accepting help, accepting love, was not weakness but strength. They kissed there under the overhang, the same place where they had first found shelter together, and it felt like coming full circle. Two people who had found each other in a storm and built a life that had weathered every challenge thrown at it. The years continued to pass, bringing joys and sorrows in equal measure. Asher's brother Ethan passed in 1913, leaving his ranch to his own children but requesting that Asher be buried near him when his time came. Asher honored that request, while also ensuring that Ethan's family remained close despite the potential for conflict over land and inheritance. The Great War came in 1914, and while it felt distant from their corner of Wyoming, it touched their family when William's oldest son enlisted in 1917. The worry during those months was intense, but the young man returned home safely in 1919. Changed by what he had seen but grateful to be back on the land he loved. The 1920s brought prosperity and change. The automobile became commonplace, and ranching methods evolved with new technology. But Asher and Winnie held to the principles that had always guided them, treating their animals with respect, their land with care, and their workers with fairness. As they moved into their 60s, they gradually turned over more of the daily operations to their children and grandchildren. But they never fully retired, always involved in some capacity, always ready with advice or assistance when needed. On a warm summer evening in 1925, 40 years after they first met, Asher and Winnie sat together on their porch, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. It was a family gathering to celebrate Winnie's 60th birthday, and the house overflowed with food and laughter and love. As the sun set and fireflies began to dance in the gathering dusk, William stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said. "To my mother and father, who built not just a ranch but a family. Who taught us that true strength comes from facing challenges together, that courage means moving forward even when you are afraid, and that love is the foundation on which everything worth having is built." Everyone raised their glasses, voices joining in agreement. Asher looked around at all these faces, these lives that he and Winnie had brought into being or influenced in some way, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Asher and Winnie walked out to look at the stars. The Wyoming sky stretched overhead, vast and eternal, the same sky that had watched over them that night in the blizzard so many years ago. "You have any regrets?" Winnie asked quietly. Asher thought about the question seriously. There had been hardships, certainly, times when money was tight or when they had made mistakes, losses that had hurt deeply. But regrets? No, he said finally. Not a single one. Everything we have been through, good and bad, led us here. To this moment, to this life. How could I regret any of it? I feel the same way, Winnie said. Even the hard times, they were worth it because we faced them together. They stood in the darkness, two people who had grown old together. Their bodies no longer as strong or quick as they once were, but their love as vibrant as ever. The journey from that chance meeting in a storm to this moment had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had been theirs, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared dreams, and a love that had proven strong enough to weather any storm. As they walked back to the house, their steps a little slower than they used to be, but still in perfect sync, Asher thought about all the things that had to align for them to find each other. The stolen horses, the blizzard, the exact timing that put them in the same place at the same moment. Some might call it coincidence, others fate. Asher did not much care what it was called. He only knew that finding Winnie in that storm had been the best moment of his life, the beginning of everything that mattered. Years continued to add themselves to their story. In 1930, they celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary surrounded by 4 generations of family. The ranch had grown far beyond what Walter Harrison could have imagined when he first homesteaded the land, but it still retained the character he had given it, still reflected the values he had lived by. Asher was 71 now, Winnie 65. Age had slowed them both, bringing aches and pains and the various indignities of bodies wearing out. But their minds remained sharp, and their love for each other, if anything, had deepened with time. On a cold December morning in 1932, Asher woke to find Winnie sleeping peacefully beside him. She looked younger in sleep, the lines of age smoothing from her face. He watched her breathe, counting each rise and fall of her chest, thinking about all the mornings he had woken beside her over nearly half a century. As if sensing his gaze, Winnie's eyes opened, and she smiled at him. "Good morning," she said, her voice still carrying that musical quality that had captivated him from the first. "Good morning," Asher replied, reaching over to take her hand. "I love you." "I love you too," Winnie said, as she had said thousands of times before, each time meaning it as deeply as the first. They rose and dressed, moving through their morning routine with the ease of long practice. Breakfast with whichever children or grandchildren were staying at the ranch. A walk around the property to check on things, though they left the heavy work to younger bodies now. Time spent with the horses, which remained Winnie's greatest joy. In the afternoon, they sat together in the study, Winnie reading while Asher worked on the ranch accounts. The companionable silence between them was comfortable, the result of 2 people who had long since learned to exist in each other's space without friction. As evening approached, Grace arrived with her husband and children for dinner. She had become a teacher as she had dreamed, running the school in Kingston and raising her own family. Her visits were always bright spots, full of stories about her students and the funny things her children had said or done. After dinner, as the family sat around the fire, someone asked about how Asher and Winnie had met. It was a story that had been told many times, but the youngest grandchildren had not heard it, and they begged for the tale. Winnie and Asher shared a look, then together they told the story. Asher described tracking his brother's stolen horses and hearing a voice in the blizzard. Winnie talked about the terror of being caught in the storm and the relief of finding shelter. They painted the picture of that night under the overhang, surrounded by horses, not knowing then that they had found something far more valuable than any amount of livestock. And Grandma kept the horses calm all by herself. One of the children asked, eyes wide with wonder. "She did," Asher confirmed. "Your grandmother is the bravest person I have ever known. She showed me that night what real courage looks like." "Grandpa helped too," Winnie added, squeezing his hand. "He showed me that accepting help does not make you weak, that we are all stronger together." The children eventually went to bed, and the adults followed not long after. Asher and Winnie made their slow way to their bedroom, helping each other with buttons and laces that fingers stiffened with age struggled to manage alone. In bed, Winnie rested her head on Asher's shoulder as she had done for decades. "We have had a good life," she said quietly. "The best," Asher agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "Do you think the young people understand?" Winnie asked. "How much work it took, how many times we could have given up but did not." "Some do, some will," Asher said. "And the ones who do not will learn in their own time, through their own struggles. That is how it works." "I suppose you are right," Winnie said. "I just want them to know how much they are loved, how everything we built was for them." "They know," Asher assured her. "They see it every day in the choices we made, the values we lived by. Our legacy is not just this ranch, Winnie. It is the family we raised, the principles we instilled, the love we showed them." The seasons turned, each one bringing its own rhythm to the ranch. Spring with its new calves and foals. Summer with long days of work under the endless sky. Autumn with its preparations for winter. And winter itself, sometimes harsh but always beautiful, covering the land in white silence. In the spring of 1935, Winnie fell ill. It started as a simple cold but settled in her lungs and would not leave. The doctor came from town, bringing medicines and advice, but at 70 years old, Winnie's body was not as resilient as it once had been. Asher sat by her bedside day and night, holding her hand, reading to her, talking about their life together. The children and grandchildren came in shifts, wanting to be close, but not wanting to overwhelm her. Winnie bore it all with her characteristic grace, never complaining, though Asher could see the effort it took for her to breathe. On a quiet evening in late May, with Asher alone beside her, Winnie's breathing grew more labored. Asher knew what was coming and felt his heart breaking even as he tried to stay strong for her. "Asher," Winnie whispered, her voice barely audible. "I am here," he said, leaning close. "I am right here." "I am not afraid," Winnie said. "I have never been afraid when you are with me." "You have never been afraid, period," Asher corrected gently. "You are the bravest person I have ever known." Winnie smiled faintly. "I had a good life, a full life. I loved and was loved. What more could anyone ask for?" "I wish we had more time," Asher said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "We had 50 years," Winnie reminded him. 50 wonderful years. That is more than most people get. Be grateful for what we had, not sad about what we are losing." "I will always be grateful," Asher promised. "You made my life worth living. You showed me what it means to love someone completely." "And you showed me the same," Winnie said. Her breathing was growing shallower, each breath an obvious effort. "Take care of our family. Tell them I love them. Tell them to be brave." "I will," Asher promised. "I will tell them every day." Winnie's eyes closed and her breathing slowed further. Asher held her hand, feeling her pulse growing weaker under his fingers. He talked to her quietly, reminding her of their life together, of all the moments, great and small, that had made up their 50 years. As the sun set outside the window, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Winnie Harrison Parker took her last breath, her hand still clasped in her husband's, a peaceful expression on her face. Asher sat with her for a long time after, unwilling to let go, unwilling to accept that the woman who had been his partner, his love, his everything for half a century was gone. Eventually, William found them and gently helped his father away, helping him begin the process of saying goodbye. The funeral was held on a beautiful June day, the kind of day Winnie had loved. It seemed like half of Wyoming turned out to pay their respects to a woman who had been a pillar of her community, a skilled horsewoman, a devoted mother and grandmother, and above all, a person of courage and integrity. Asher bore it all with stoic dignity, accepting condolences, thanking people for coming, going through the motions because that was what Winnie would have wanted. But inside, he felt hollow, as if a part of him had been buried alongside her. The weeks and months that followed were the hardest of Asher's life. He had been through difficulties before, had weathered droughts and financial hardships and the death of loved ones. But losing Winnie was different. She had been his constant, his touchstone, the center around which his entire world revolved. Without her, he felt adrift. His children rallied around him, making sure he was never alone, encouraging him to eat, to rest, to keep going. They brought his grandchildren to visit, and Asher found some comfort in their young faces, seeing echoes of Winnie in their features and mannerisms. Gradually, as spring turned to summer and summer to fall, Asher found a new rhythm to his days. The grief never left, but it became something he could carry rather than something that crushed him. He spent time with the horses, finding peace in their company as Winnie always had. He worked on small projects around the ranch, keeping his hands busy. He told stories about Winnie to anyone who would listen, keeping her memory alive through words. One winter morning, almost a year after Winnie's death, Asher took a walk out to the canyon where they had first found shelter together. Snow covered the ground, and the world was quiet and still. He stood under the overhang, remembering that night 50 years ago when a blizzard had brought them together. "I miss you," he said aloud, his words carried away by the cold wind. "Every single day I miss you, but I am grateful for every moment we had. You taught me what it means to love someone, to build a life with someone. You showed me true beauty, Winnie, not just in that storm, but every day for 50 years. He felt no response, no sign that she could hear him. But standing there in the place where their story had begun, Asher felt a sense of peace settle over him. Winnie was gone, but the love they had shared was not. It lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch they had built together, in every lesson they had taught, and every value they had lived by. Asher lived for another 3 years, staying active and engaged with the ranch and his family until the end. He died peacefully in his sleep in January of 1938, at the age of 79. His children found him in the morning, a slight smile on his face, as if he had seen something wonderful in his dreams. They buried him beside Winnie on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under the endless Wyoming sky they had both loved. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single inscription: "Together in the storm, together in peace." The ranch continued on, passed down through generations of the Parker family. The original house still stood, carefully maintained and cherished as the birthplace of a legacy. The horses they raised still bore the mark of Winnie's training methods and Asher's business acumen. In the decades that followed, when grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren gathered at the ranch for holidays and celebrations, someone would always tell the story of Asher and Winnie. How they met in a blizzard, how they built a life together through courage and hard work and unwavering love. The story became legend within the family, a reminder of where they came from and the values that defined them. That courage meant facing your fears. That love meant partnership and respect. That true beauty was not found in appearances, but in the strength of someone's character and the bravery of their heart. And on winter nights when storms swept across the Wyoming plains, some family members swore they could hear voices in the wind, a man and a woman working together to guide something precious to safety, never giving up, never turning back, facing the storm together as they always had. The land Asher and Winnie had worked so hard to build remained in the Parker family for over a century, a testament to what two people could create when they joined their lives and dreams. The horses they bred became renowned throughout the West. The values they instilled were passed down through generations. But more than any material legacy, Asher and Winnie left behind a story of love that had survived every test, grown stronger through every challenge, and ultimately transcended even death itself. Theirs was a love born in the wildest of circumstances, forged in the crucible of shared struggle, and refined through decades of daily choosing each other again and again. It was the kind of love that built families and communities, that shaped futures and inspired dreams. The kind of love that proved that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected places, in the heart of a storm, in the courage of a woman refusing to give up, in the steady strength of a man willing to stand beside her. And though they were gone, their love lived on, woven into the very fabric of the ranch, whispered in the wind across the grasslands, carried forward in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched. A love story for the ages, born in a blizzard 50 years before the end, when a cowboy found a woman guiding lost horses through a storm and discovered in her courage the truest beauty he would ever know.